Hello, sir.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, sir. Henry, please just walk us through who you are and what you do. For those that don't know, quick. Give me the 5 to 6 second bio. I know there's a lot there, but
Yeah,
I want to just go right in because I know you've got a lot of things going on, a lot of
yeah.
moving parts.
So thank you for having me. My name is Henry Garrido. I'm the executive director of District Council 37, which is the largest municipal union in the city of New York, representing 150,000 members and about 100,000 retirees. But we provide coverage and services for a family of about 350,000 people. I also am the vice president of the International Union, which represents 1.4 million people. I'm the first and only Latino to serve as both the executive director and the international vice president, and the first Dominican to be so. Um, I serve on the Workforce Investment Board as a member, and I'm a trustee of NYCERS, which invests their money from the pension for the workers, representing about $300 billion plus. And I also serve as co-chair of the Municipal Labor Committee, which negotiates healthcare for 1.4 million workers, the dependents, and the retirees.
A
Was
lot.
that quick enough?
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. So, Henry, let's start first with why no on Cuomo? Why did you decide early on that you were not going to support the former governor in terms of the union and the
Yeah,
endorsement, which again you proved to have bet on the right person
yeah.
ultimately. But I want to start there.
Well, I think I saw something on the numbers, and also, I spoke with a lot of young people and in our union, which makes a large portion of a lot of our locals. And I saw an excitement about the candidate that won, in this case, Zohran Mamdani, that we had not seen for a very long time. I think not since Obama. And so that was a good thing because we need to revitalize our base. We need to revitalize the energy, given what's happening at the national level, the absolute craziness that's happening with President Trump. And I think I saw in him a fresh start, a bright young man with great ideas that were being branded as socialist, but in reality are ideas that went to the core issue of the campaign that I think were lost to the national campaign, and that's affordability, right? And the fact that our members who are have residency requirement are struggling with housing and struggling with inflation and struggling with transportation issues, and his ideas began to coalesce to present those ideas, right? This was not any disrespect to the former governor, but we also had a history with him, quite frankly, and we know that he had, for instance, established a tier six lower pension tier for young workers who are now struggling, having to pay more in order to retire later and even get less from their pension. So that's a combination of the two things. Also, we had issues with the defunding of Medicaid here in New York for public hospitals, and it was a constant fight when the De Blasio administration was there, having to go back to fight the former governor to fund it. So it was a combination of the two things. But I think if I were to be more succinct, I would say he was just brilliant, and he is brilliant, and I think he's. And I don't say that about a lot of people. I think
Mhm.
he presents a whole new, fresh view for our future, and for that reason, we ended up endorsing him, and it was the right move.
Henry, speak to why do you think that Eric Adams is a one-term mayor? As someone again early on. I know you supported him, and then over
I did.
time, right? And then you sort of um, what give me your analysis as to what he did wrong to again become a one-term mayor.
Well, I think quite honestly, obviously his legal problems were a very challenging, right? They just kept piling on. Sometimes in politics perception become reality, right? The perception that he was, corrupt and that his administration was corrupt, and the resignation of so many people around him and his team was something that was hard to overcome. And then, his support of Trump and his, you know, courting, if you will, of Trump's support at a time where he was under indictment was difficult to accept for many of the members I represent, especially since we're a city of immigrants, right? And in that city of immigrants, I think that I go back to that interview with Hogan when he was on Fox News, when he basically sat and said, "I'm going to be up your butt if you don't follow it out," and the mayor didn't say a single thing. And also, I also think that there was a tactical mistake. I don't know if it was him or his team to basically apologize for, the turmoil, even if you were innocent, all right, and assume that he is, because obviously he is in a court of law, and in many people's opinion, he was not. But in my union, in my view, you're innocent until proven otherwise. But even if you were, to not acknowledge that, to put New Yorkers to that was a difficult, and I think it was a very big mistake that voters reflected on. And you could see in his low poll numbers and also the support, right? The groups, they were like, done with him. And it's funny because I don't necessarily think he did a bad job as a mayor. I think he did a lot of good things. Obviously, for city workers, he was very good. He gave us a collective bargaining agreement that covered everybody. Almost every union had a collective bargaining agreement. That is important, right, for working people. That I think it's really important. We signed some historic agreement, including um, the remote work policy that had been escaping city for a long time, and needed the city need to be competitive. I mean, we did compressed schedules. Um, we did all kinds of great things together, right? We went through the preparedness for COVID again. So from the perspective, I don't necessarily think he did a poor job, right? But the perception that he was not on the job at the end, that he was more interested or more preoccupied, if you will, with handling his legal issues than he was with running the city, was something that I think a lot of voters turn them away from him, in spite of the fact that he had won on the promise to, uh, you know, make the city run and make stuff happen and so on and so forth.
Henry, I have a question now, speaker's race. So last round, which ultimately led to the victory or whatever, the Speaker Adrian Adams becoming speaker, there was a conversation around labor strong, right? That the labor unions were going to come together and agree on a candidate. My understanding is that ultimately the Hotel Motel Trades Council went with Francisco Moya, which was sort of a split between the labor coalition. What is the approach this time around? I know in Somos there were pictures of the county leaders having conversations, saying that some of the counties prefer Menin. Now we're hearing that there's there's a group of folks supporting Hudson. I want to hear what your position is in terms of preference, if any, and in terms of approach. Is that still the case that the labor unions are going to come together and agree on a person? Or what's the approach this time around? And do you have a preference, or you're not there yet? Meaning even the labor unions. What's the strategy now?
So you are correct. We formulated a coalition on Labor Strong last time. It actually was around a set of candidates. It wasn't just about the speaker, right? We pushed for 21 candidates at the city council level, and were successful in 19 out of those 21 races. So it was about a coalition that first started to elect council members. What we had Labor Strong. We ended up having more than just the three unions, right? It was the 32 BJ, it was the Hotel Trades Council, and it was DC 37. Later on, we ended up adding Communication Workers of America and the nurses as part of a coalition. At that time, initially, the Hotel Trades Council had pushed for Moya, didn't get it successfully, and 32 BJ and us supported Adrian, and they came around ultimately. And the other two unions joined us, and we were successful in getting Adrian, or pushing for Adrian along with many others. And I think it was the right move at the time. It turns out Adrian had a kind of a difficult task with a lot of young council members who were a little bit inexperienced, you know, and so that was a challenge, but she managed, and I think she did a fantastic job as speaker, balancing out the challenges of, the progressive left, who was pushing at times things that were hard to deal with, and also dealing with Eric and keeping a check and balance, which is what you want to see in a speaker. And so this time around, we expect to do the same. There is discussion about a labor coalition that involves the same group, with the exception of the nurses. They are not part of this discussion. But Hotel Choice Council, DC 37 and 32 BJ, as the Labor Strong Coalition remains, you know, uh, united first in the support of many council members, which were successful, as I said before. And now there's a discussion about who the speaker for me. That coalition hasn't yet to endorse. We know the Hotel Choice Council has been pushing Julie Manning. Um, I think the race is narrowing with Carmen de la Rosa dropping out, but you still have a number of consideration. I think you have 3 or 4 candidates that are left that are more viable than others. There's more than 3 candidates running. There's Julie Manning at the top, which is considered front runner for not just for me, for many other unions. There is the issue of, and then of course there's Crystal Hudson, right, from Brooklyn, who has been picking up momentum by getting people like Carmen, who dropped out, to endorse her. And then lastly, I think Amanda Farias, which is still remains a candidate. And one of the discussion is that we need a Latino or person of color to lead the council. Those are part of the discussions that are going on right now. I think neither one of those 3 candidates has secured enough votes. I think county, as you know, always plays a role, has been favoring Julie Manning in total, with very few exception. I think it's weird what's happening with a little bit with the Republicans of the council. They seem to be split. So there's no one winner, but based on what I have heard so far from council members, it looks like Julie Manning has the most votes, and followed closely by Crystal Hudson. And in this list search to select Amanda Farias as the compromise candidate. So there's all discussions. We have not yet come out. We really like Julie because of things she's done for us. She's done a lot of good things. She's done some legislation that allow us to fight back the hospitals, many of which are in her district, and that took courage for her to do that. And then other things that she did around the issue of the creation of a healthcare accountability office was really big. But we also have a great relationship with Crystal, right? Who helped us fight a big fight in her own district, in the Brooklyn Botanical Garden, where we were facing difficult situation there against a contractor that was threatening the botanical gardens, light and shadow that was blocking. And we worked together on the layouts for Brooklyn Museum, which is also in her district. So those are things. And of course, Amanda and I, as I have had great relationships so far. So the good news is that we have 3 outstanding candidates, and that this will be also decided. It remains to be seen what our mayor-elect is going to do, whether he's going to get involved in the race or not. There may be a possibility he may. And who he pushes also will be an important part of the decision process. Last time, I think you probably know this, that Mayor Adams at the time ended up endorsing Moya. But by that time, we had already secured the votes, and we were not in tandem with the mayor, and but we were successful in getting enough votes to do it. I think this is a tight race that's going to be resolved in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Believe it or not, even though the vote will take place, in January, but I think there's some discussions about labor, about those 3 candidates at the top right now.
Henry, question, when you mentioned HTC, the relationship HTC has with Julie Menon, would that be considered the same deja vu all over again? The fact that they've gotten ahead and said, we want Julie without waiting for the rest of the labor unions? One, and two, how much of any dialogue with the outcome, let's say Labor Strong decides on a candidate, how much of that dialogue consists of including county leaders? Because they have obviously some sway, or is it just a go at it alone approach? Talk to me about that strategy.
Yeah. Well, I don't necessarily think it's deja vu. I think that I mean we have tremendous respect for Rich Morocco and for the work that he does. Remember, the three of us ended up supporting Eric when no one did, and we're successful. Eric Adams was successful in making sure that happened. This time around, it was the opposite. So last time we were together on Eric. This time around, 32 BJ, which has now a new president, Imani Pastrick, um, and Hotel Choice Council ended up endorsing Cuomo, where we decided to go a different way, right? It didn't break the Labor Strong Coalition for our work that we were doing at the city council level. It didn't work. It didn't break the Labor Strong Coalition in terms of the legislation that we were pushing, or the legislators that we were supporting, right? But in this case, when they wanted to align to go for Cuomo, I said no. We have a different history, and I'm glad to know that our history was successful in doing that. I don't know that it is. I mean, speak with Rich very often because we have a lot to fight for. I mean, um, you know that we have residency requirement in the city of New York. City workers do that, and some of them don't. Police, fire, teachers, they live outside of the borough in a large numbers. But these C37 members, Hotel Choice Council members, are here, right? 32 BJ are here, right? Part 1199, they're part of it, right? So these are folks that live within the five boroughs, and that's really important. So even though the labor, there's 300 and almost 50,000 city workers, right? And plus private sector workers, the vast majority of those who live in the city are ours. We're not only the largest. So that's part of the consideration. I think I listen to my brethren. I listen to my brothers and my sisters in the labor movement, in the struggle. I think the UFT is coming in now that they were not as active last time, but now are putting themselves on that as part of support. They've come in favor of Julie, as far as I'm aware. So I don't think the Hotel Choice Council is alone, right? RDWSU came out in support of her, right? So there's a lot of that. There's more labor, and so it's a different dynamic this time around. Um, and so as such, I think it's going to be slightly different. Plus, remember, this is different in that this was not like when De Blasio and Melissa aligned, right? Ended up being an early lineman. This year, there's a concern, obviously, that you are going to have a speaker that's going to be in support of this movement of affordability, or that there's going to be a speaker that's going to be a little more conservative to that idea. So there's a lot going on right now, but I don't know that that's necessarily a prediction of what's going to place. As we've seen, but some of the changes, like Sylvina Powell said she wasn't going to run, and now she is going to run. And so now she's trying to whip votes too. And so there's all kinds of coalitions forming and breaking at the same time. County, this time, it's also a little more fractured than it was in the past, right? Queens has remained strong on the Gregory Meeks. She's supporting Julie. And so Jamal, right, obviously in the Bronx, a little more split because Amanda is from the Bronx and because there are people in that delegation who will probably support her or may support her. They have not made a decision yet. That plays into it. And then Rodney's in Brooklyn trying to consolidate what has not been a solid group for a very long time. Even when Seti was there at the end, has also has a split conference, right? And so county per county say it's not what it used to be in the sense that they would come in with a solid block of 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever. Now you're going to have all kinds of scenarios where accounting may be split here, or labor may be there. So I think it's going to be one of the most interesting selections of, of of our lifetime, much like it was with Mandan.
Henry, question. I know I saw you had a CBC conversation around policy, and you had a lot to say about OMB and the director. And we're going to leave his name out of it, but just for argument's sake. Now, the case can be made that you bet on the right team. You bet on the winning team. How involved will you be in terms of personnel in the city hall or in the mayoral administration? Fully understanding that, the sort of the labor commissioner and OMB have a lot to do with the livelihood of your
Yeah.
membership. What involvement on the grounds that you can say, hey, I was very involved in the ultimate outcome. Would you be
Yeah.
involved, or would you say, hey?
No, I tend not to get myself into that level, but for precisely because these are be the commissioners and the managers that I'm going to have to deal with right at the time. So there's a lot of conversation. There was this a posting in one of the publications that suggested I was up and running for one of the deputy mayor position. That is not this. That's not true. I would not consider that. So the answer is no to that. I am the co-chair of the transition team on the controller's office. And because I sit on that pension committee and because I do a lot of work with the controller's office, I think that's a little different because I'm coming from the perspective of being a trustee, right, on the transition team. I will be co-chairing that very proudly. Pensions are a very big reason that I am where I am, and if the reasons why I have been involved in the union. So I'm co-chairing that. I am not in the transition team for the Mandania situation. I think I like to think about it less about people and more about ideas and concepts, right? And who are the right people to lead that. We already heard that Dean Fullahan will be first deputy mayor, and with her, Liz is going to be the chief of staff, and that's all great. I think those are very good selections. I worked with Dean during the Blasio administration, and I think that was very a good partnership and a good fix. Dean had been uh, worked with Albany in Albany before, which was a critical piece to understand things like childcare and the original version of childcare, which came from when Pataki was here, Universal Pre-K. I was here when that happened. Um, so those decisions have already been made. We know some commissioners are not going to be here, but we've also heard about some commissions that will be staying, like the police commissioner. He made that public, right? But there's a lot of big decisions to make. As far as I'm concerned, people who got there's a lot of good people still in City Hall in different areas of agencies who have done a great job. Some have less, some are working to come back. So that's going to be interesting. But I'm not involved into picking commissioners or, you know, to that matter, recommending commissioners. Not at that granular level. I may say, well, this one's doing a good job, but that one's doing a good job. I may say this is what we want to see on this agency moving forward and things like that. But no, I don't get involved in personal decisions that will be up to the mayor and his team.
Henry, how thoughts on universal childcare? I know you had a roundtable on one for your members, right, and their livelihoods,
Mhm.
both from an employment perspective, but also just like how can they get more done and be more efficient in the workplace when they have childcare?
Yeah.
One, two,
So,
rent freezes,
mhm.
right? And free buses, right? Let's face it, if you're basically getting by and you can get to and from work on a free bus, that will also impact. How involved will you be in terms of pushing this agenda in Albany? When it requires it's a lot of money, right? Let's call it like it is. The MTA, I mean, respectfully, who knows? There's people who make, say that they don't know where them, in some cases, or the lack of transparency and accountability. But I'm just basically on what I read and hear. How involved will you be on pushing some of these initiatives in Albany, considering the impact it'll have on your membership?
The answer is very involved. We would be pushing really hard for this because it's an affordability agenda that voters that voted for, right? It wasn't just for Mandani. They were giving him a mandate. Remember, we have more than 2 million people voting, right? And that's the highest number since 1969. And we want Albany to hear those voters, right? And so from my perspective, the child care is and universal child care is a must. It is something that has been really difficult for our members to achieve. It is very difficult to implement and expensive to the point that once we were not doing universal child care or the goal of hitting that, we negotiated a child care fund that came out of a collective bargaining agreement for our members. Um, and we have people on a waiting list, right? As most New Yorkers do, because you can't find the right fit. It's not just about the number. If you have to travel 20 miles to get to a childcare center, that's not feasible, especially when you work. And working people, as I said, needs to they need to have flexibility. Also, with the proliferation of um, you know overtime, you talked about it. What I mentioned at OMB, right? There are over 20,000 vacancies in the city of New York, and the city has been slow in filling those at the request and direction of OMB. And in that process of doing so, they've also done something very difficult, which is force people to stay behind and do more with less, meaning more overtime, and then cap it for pension purposes. When you are required to do that, then you have the unenviable choices. Do I go and take care of my child? Um, or do I stay on the job and try to find an extended childcare, right? Or do I um, face potentially charges against from ACS, right? So these are not good choices. So from that perspective, we think that childcare is it's a very good thing and something we should be pushing. I think there are a couple of ways to achieve it, right? As I said, when I was here when the original agreement with Universal Pre-K was done in the 90s, right? And at that time, a portion of the funding came from lottery proceeds. And then later on got amended. But Pataki insisted on the START program rebate for property taxes in Long Island as a way of, during his reelection campaign, became a sort of like a trading post between the city and the state in New York. So that's one way to do is to go back to the drawing board, right? To fund that through lottery proceeds and any other sources of funding. The second is amending foundation aid. Foundation aid, which is a formula is done to go to the school, is one of the ways that you can increase revenue for the city. And if you include poverty measures, real true cost of living, real true property measures, not some crazy federal number that doesn't abide by the cost of living in the city, and you have a true cost of living as a measurement, that you could also amend the existing formula for foundation aid, for school aid, that would come from the city of New York, and that requires negotiations. As far as our members, as I said, our members have residency requirement. They take the bus more than any other union, right? They're some of the lowest paid city workers. And so that would be a huge piece and very critical. Um, and I think, rent freeze is also an important aspect of it. We asked him during the first mayoral round debate, and he actually came out at that time in favor of it. But I think, given the dynamics of how the rent uh, control board operates, I don't see that as a first year quick initiative, right? Because he's got to the mayor-elect has to put these people there, and there's got to be a discussion about you know who was appointed, is there a majority before that happens. I think the most immediate discussion will be about the state budget, and the state budget could have those two pieces that you mentioned before: buses, free buses, um, and also um, you know the issue of childcare is something that could be implemented. I'm not suggesting by any measure that it will be easy to do, but I will remember I mean, I will remind you that New York State it's the richest state in many ways, because even though smaller than California, we give more tax expenditures, a ton more tax breaks than any other states, including California. You know, and that means Wall Street, that means tax breaks to people like the Madison Square Gardens of the world, who have been on a pilot for a very long time, right? And do we need to look at that? Do we need to look at other sources of revenue, right? Because I remember 4 years ago and 8 years ago, when they were saying, if you raise taxes and come in, people are going to leave the city, they're going to leave the state. In the meantime, not only did they not leave the city or the state, a handful did, but it turns out the people who left were not the millionaires or the billionaires. It was the middle class.
Yeah.
Those are the people living, and they left for other reasons. They left to get better schools. They left to get better healthcare. They get for the same reasons we're talking about. In the meantime, more millionaires and billionaires were made during that 8 year period when people were talking about this massive exodus. So I don't buy into this whole thing that, oh, well, if you do this, this is a socialist movement that's going to result in people being rejected. Um, so I think it remains to be seen. But I think we're going to be really heavily involved in pushing for these ideas, because they mean a lot. They would mean a lot to our members.
Henry, I want to wrap this up. Let's go. Let's have some fun. What advice would you give your 21-year-old self?
Spend less. I would say, save more for the future. Obviously, that's a big thing. Um, you kind of learn those things later in life. Um, and I would say get some sleep, brother, like because you're gonna need it. And at the time when you're 21, you're not thinking about those things. You're not thinking about savings in many ways, and you're not thinking about sleeping and getting the necessary rest. That's a critical part of not only being healthy, but being mentally, uh, um, acute, to have your mentality basically alive. So I would say those are the two main things that I would say.
Most influential book you've ever read?
Wow, that's hard.
That's framed to frame you the way you view the world.
I think Democracy in Chain was one of my favorite books. I think in Spanish, Los que falsificaron la firma de Dios, de Beato Ascensión, was incredible. I think Drowned by Junot Diaz is an amazing book. I think there's a book called These Are the Plunderers, who I love. I carry with me. It's about the role of private equity and financiers and hedge funds and what they do in order to set up things in government to benefit them, not the public. I think those books are very influential. So one is for politics, Democracy in Chains. The other one is for financing, and the other two are socially and historical books in their own context.
Do you believe in karma? Do you believe in the
I
golden rule?
100%, 100% on both. I think I live by that.
Henry, best salsa artist ever?
That's tough, but I would say Frankie Ruiz and Maelo Ruiz. I mean, to me, Maelo Rivera and Frankie Ruiz are the top two in my book.
Top merengue artist?
Sergio Vargas. I think Rudy Perez was a close second, but Sergio Vargas, I think, to me, is the best.
Greatest baseball player?
I'm gonna be hated because it's in my mind it's not a Dominican. I think Ken Gifford Jr. was an all around fantastic player. I think defense is overrated, and we have a lot to choose. But I think he was my favorite.
Basketball player?
I think Michael Jordan, without a doubt, hands down.
And we'll end with this. Who is to you the most important, or someone that gets it right in the world and in the world you live in, whether politics, labor? Who's the person that impresses you most in terms of their political acumen, their vision, and their ability to get it right? Someone, any name. It could be a labor leader, it could be an elected official, it could be
Yeah,
someone from your past.
I think there's a woman named Elaine Bernard who used to run the Harvard program for labor legal studies, who's written a tremendous amount of work, books, and other publications, has influenced so many people, so many union leaders, so many elected leaders, because she's always at the forefront of the discussion of the things that matter. Her theory about the fact that we spend more time at work than we do with our own family, and why democratizing that is an important thing, I think has been tremendously moving and underrated. She has trained thousands of union leaders across the world, not just here in the United States, but across the globe. She's just an amazing, amazing person that I so admire for the work that she does. I think in the world of politics, Letitia James, hands down, has the quintessential personality of courage and resilience and always fighting the right thing. I have tremendous amount of respect for Letitia James, our Attorney General, even on the face of attacks and on the face of criticism and all the stuff that the Trump administration is doing to try to get her for doing her job. I should add. I think I so admire that woman for the work that she does every day.
Henry, I want to wrap this up. Thank you for your time. Anything you want to add that I forgot to ask you?
No, I will say this to you. For us, especially as Latinos, we tend to sell ourselves short. That we sometimes talk about number as if numbers translate into power, and to power to acquire capital, and to power to access contracts, and to power to get appointments in the government, to power to mobilize economic development, or to do development in certain neighborhoods where there's a large number of Latinos in population. And I've learned from labor that power concedes nothing without demand. Like Ferry Douglass used to say, that you have to organize and you have to fight for everything you get. More so in us, in our communities. So I would say it is time for us to continue to organize in the way that we did in the 50s and 60s to get what we need. And numbers are important. The fact that we're a large part of New York, it's important. The fact that we're a larger part of the voting population over the states at a national level is important, and that we're growing. But that doesn't necessarily translate into power unless we're willing to organize to get there in the first place.
Henry, thanks again. All the best to you, and safe travels back when you do return. All the best. Thank you so much, friend.
Thank you. Have a good